library of functions, piecewise-defined functions. So first we're going to start by looking at some basic graphs. So for the first one, number A, it says graph, and then it says f of x equals b. Now this b could either be a positive or negative number, real number. So in essence, I'm just going to put it here and just call this b for now. So this is what these graphs look like. So they could be any horizontal line and call that b. So if it was positive, it'd be up here. If it was negative, it could be down here, assuming that's a straight line, of course. But that's the idea of f of x equaling b. They call that the constant function. Now this next function is f of x equals x. So that's like y equals x. So that's going to give us the line, and that's the graph there. And they call this the identity function. Now the next one is x squared, and we know that at 0 it's 0. Now again, remember, if you don't know what the graph looks like, you can always do an xy table. So at 2 it's 4, so that'll be up there. So if I drew this, I would get this function here. And they call this the square function. And this function here, this is f of x equals x cubed. And this function goes at 0, it's 0, and at 1, it's 1, and at negative 1, it's negative 1. And I can continue this process, and it's going to go like this and like that. So that's the cube function. That's what they call it. So now the next function is going to be this 1 over x. And the way we graph this one is, now this one would probably take an XY table if you've never seen it before. So at 1, I know it's 1, and at 1/2, I know it's 2. So it's building this way. And it does the same thing, on this side. And it has an asymptote at the x-axis and the y-axis. And this is called the reciprocal function. Now for the next function, it's the g of x equals the square root of x. So at 0, it's 0 because 0 times 0 is 0, and the square root of that would be 0, so that's here. And at 1, it's 1. And at 4, actually, it's going to be 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So at 4, it's 2. So it's actually doing this. Now again, I didn't write out the XY table, but in essence, that's what I was building here. Now again, initially, you might have to do that with these, but try to get these basic functions down. They're a big help, and they call this the square root function. Now this is h of x equals the cube root of x. So now for this one, 1, it's 1. And at 8, it's actually 2. So I'm just going to actually just draw this out. And this also comes this way in a similar fashion. Actually the same, but just the other way. So this is what this function looks like. And this is called the cube root function. And the next one here is the absolute value function. And what's going to happen, 0, it's 0. At 1, it's 1. 2, it's 2. So this is just going to be this line this way. And then when it's negative 1, that's here, it's going to be positive 1. And then at negative 2, it's positive 2. So it actually does this. So it looks like a V. And this is called the absolute value function. So that one's the absolute value function. We have one more to go, and that's here. This one is called the integer star x star thing here. This is called the greatest integer less than or equal to x. Now this is an interesting graph. So let's say I pick 0. So if I pick x equaling 0, so the greatest integer less than or equal to x. So less than or equal to, so 0 equals 0, that as in 0 is an integer, so it's going to be there. And then let's go to 1 now. Well, actually 1/2. So if I pick x equals 1/2, that'll be right in here. that would be what integer is less than or equal to that? The greatest one that's less than or equal to that. So that would also be 0. And then what happens at 1? So the greatest integer less than or equal to 1 would be 1. So actually what happens is I get a hole here. And I get this line here. So then at 1, it's going to be solid. And then when I get to 2, I can't include the 2. And the 2 is going to be at 2. And then it's going to be an open circle at 3. And then the same thing here. So this is called the greatest integer function. So now if we just do a quick recap, this is just the interesting function, the greatest integer function here. We have the absolute value function here, the cube function here, square root function here, reciprocal function here, and then the other ones, I got a cube function, square function, identity function, and constant function. So these are all the basic functions that we should know what the pictures look like in general. Now from here we can get into a lot of different sort of combination of these when we get into the piecewise functions. But this is actually a good base of functions to know.